All right, y'all. I got on my lawyer hat. We're going to talk lawyer things. So today, let's spend some time talking about the shenanigans in this new executive order that was dropped April 3rd. About a month late, but that's okay. It's finally here. And it's entitled Urgent National Action to Save College Sports. Okay. So now let me take you to the bottom line and then work my way through the analysis. So the bottom line on this executive order is essentially do what I want you to do. I being the president, okay? Even if what I want you to do is a violation of existing law. And if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm just going to cut your federal funding, institution of higher education. Just going to cut you off. Okay. So, is this going to work? Probably not, but it's going to create chaos in the process of sorting itself out. So let's talk about what an executive order can and cannot do, just to refresh our recollection as we get into this discussion. First of all, an executive order is a written directive by the president that essentially takes actions to make sure that existing laws are executed. An executive order cannot make law, it cannot overturn law, and it can be challenged in court. Okay, so executive order can't make law. It can only interpret existing law. Okay. And then finally, it only applies to what's in the purview of the US government. It does not apply to private enterprise at all. Okay. So just because of the nature of what an executive order was designed to do, it is limited in its ability to save college sports at all. It's not the right vehicle. But here we are. Executive order number 2 from this president about saving college sports. Okay, let's get into the executive order itself. So I read the whole thing from soup to nuts. Okay, so the executive order has a background section. And in the background, it talks about a couple things that are true. It talks about a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense, but a lot of things that are true. A couple. So first of all, it says that the rules have been undermined by the rules being the NCAA rules is what it implies, have been undermined by court decisions and state legislatures looking to provide schools in their states with an advantage. Yep, that's right. That is true. It also says that a convergence of pressures to win and a loosening of rules regarding transfer, eligibility, payments to athletes has created recurring deficit situations at some schools and siphoning resources from the academy and other sports. Also roughly true. Okay? So he says a lot of things in the background section, but those things are not too bad. Then he pivots to this financial perils argument that essentially turns the corner and doesn't make a low-key threat, makes an out-the-box, just straight-out threat. So the quote regarding financial perils, these financial perils, meaning these deficits that I just mentioned, and he talks about the debt, references the Florida State debt in the stadium, references the Penn State debt in the stadium, not by name, just by dollar amount, okay? These financial perils will inevitably siphon funds from universities' educational and research purposes, which could impact their capabilities and responsibilities as federal contractors and grantees. So that's his play to say, oh, college sports, y'all jacking up research. And we, Department of Defense, Department of Health and Human Services, National Science Foundation, we spend a lot of money funding research at these institutions, and so we need to make sure that our research is protected. Now, mind you, this is the same administration that gutted research expenditures at institutions of higher education on no notice and for no good reason. But I digress. Let me get back on point. Okay. So after encouraging Congress to take some action, the executive order is supposed to go into effect August 1st. And it's supposed to apply to schools that have more than 20 million in revenue. It's a very low threshold, very low. Okay. So all these federal agencies are to evaluate violations of applicable law by the NCAA. It uses another word to describe them, not the NCAA, but another term. Okay. But violations of applicable law by the NCAA regarding eligibility, the transfer portal, revenue sharing, and collectives. Okay. Now, It also goes on to say that the NCAA must protect women's and Olympic sports. And so this theme of protecting women's sports and Olympic sports makes its way throughout the executive order in multiple places. No issues from that perspective. But here are some of the things that expects that institutions, including the NCAA, who will change their rules to conform to these requirements so that the institutions have to change. Here are the things that it wants to see. Age-based limits on participation. Right now, there are no age-based limits. As long as you got eligibility, you are eligible to participate. So age-based limits, 5 years to play, period. So right now we've got the 4 seasons in 5 years rule. It's like 5 years. Already got some court law, case law says we can't do that, but okay. No professional athletes can return. Now, I think we all feel this in our bones with what's going on with basketball this year in particular, where we saw athletes who had been formerly drafted by the NBA, who played in the G League, who played in Europe, suddenly are back and are playing college ball that don't pass a straight face test. But right now, there's some authority that allows that to happen, both inside the NCAA and as a matter of court action. So no professional athletes can return. The other one is, and this is the one that's making everybody bonkers, one-time transfer as an undergraduate and one time to transfer as a graduate student. So kill the whole transfer as many times as you want. One time you get to transfer. It's not even a second time you have to wait a year, just one time period. Okay. So right now we've got 1 year annual transfer portal windows because football is now down to 1. We're about to hit basketball tomorrow. Okay. So it's like, but you can only use that one time in your college career. And then if you graduate within these 5 years, you can use it again. Okay. Now, the EO actually also talks about fixing the portal window so it does not interfere with academics. Not a bad idea. Okay. Medical care for athletes, which I did not know was a problem. Please let me know if that is. I just didn't know that it was and needed to be mentioned. The revenue share should include women's and Olympic sports, which will make institutions of higher ed crazy. Because right now, more than 90% is going to football and basketball, maybe a little bit of women's basketball and a couple other sports, but that's where most of the money is going. So this notion of including women's and Olympic sports is creating heartburn just reading it. Okay. No use of federal dollars to pay for NIL or the rev share. Now, NIL is supposed to be third-party money anyway. So I don't know. Okay. Rev share is a different animal. And so I think it's just accounting to make these dollars not be applicable to rev share. Okay. And no payments by collectives. Now, it does not say this expressly, but it does consider a collective to be a fraudulent NIL scheme, and that's a defined term in the executive order. So no payments by fraudulent NIL schemes, and collectives are considered fraudulent NIL schemes. And also they want to see a national registry for student athletes to protect them from agents. So I'm not sure how the national registry protects students from bad actors that are agents, but here we are. Okay. And of course, the institution has to report all these things, multiple things, to the Department of Education. Now, why does this create chaos? Because that's exactly what is about to happen. Okay. Creates chaos for a number of reasons. First, many of these issues have already been resolved by the House settlement. Okay. And so the executive order is opening up law that has already been settled. That's number one. Okay. Number two, many of these things are already against current law. So not that it's been settled, that the laws just say you cannot do that. But here we are. Okay. Now, interestingly, an executive order, and I alluded to this before, cannot control the actions of the NCAA because the NCAA is a private institution. And an executive order cannot reach to a private institution to control it. Now, finally, an executive order cannot invalidate state law. It can only handle federal law. So these attempts to reconcile state law or take things off the book from a state law perspective, an executive order can't do it. Okay. But the problem is now it's out there. And so universities, institutions need to figure out what to do because in a very plain way, This executive order has said, if you do not do what I want you to do, I'm going to cut your funding. And in an environment where many of these institutions have already been harmed by this no notice cutting of funding that has already happened for much of the research enterprise, okay, these universities are now concerned. It's like, do I start to comply with this even though it's against the law? Or what? Because if this doesn't make it through the courts fast enough, this thing could go into effect, and then we might later on find out that it's against the law. But in the meantime, I've been harmed by it. So the institutions are in a bad spot, and then we got to figure out what to do. Now, this executive order will be challenged. As a matter of fact, as I was reading it, I could see the plaintiffs' lawyers lining their plaintiffs up to bring suits against this executive order. It probably is a violation of law on numerous counts. Maybe it will encourage Congress to act. I don't know. But this executive order's got a lot in it, and it's trying to do a lot of things to save college sports. And if you don't want to be saved, then you getting your funding cut. It's shady and it's shenanigans. We'll see if it works. Anyway, as always, let me know what you think.